And of these also Enoch, the seventh from Adam, prophesied, saying, Behold, the Lord has come with thousands of his saints to execute judgment. Jude 1:14-15. Have you ever wondered why one of the oldest books, even quoted by apostles, was simply erased from sacred history? The Book of Enoch not only reveals shocking details about fallen angels and giants who dominated the earth, it also presents a prophetic timeline that begins before Genesis and extends to the end of humanity. Why were these prophecies forbidden? What do they hide? And why are they being fulfilled right now before our very eyes? In this video, you will gain access to a spiritual and prophetic vision that has been silenced for centuries, a forgotten divine code that connects the celestial backstage to the crisis of modern humanity. If you seek answers that traditional religion avoids, prepare to dive into revelations that may change the way you view the Bible, the end times, and your own destiny. Chapter 1. Enoch, the first prophet of the end. Before the heavens were shaken, before the earth was covered by the waters of judgment, and long before the prophets raised their voices in Israel, there was a man who walked with God not only in holiness but in revelation. He did not die like the others. He had no grave, no decaying body, no epitaph carved in stone. He was taken, removed from the earth as a sign, a silent warning to future centuries. His name was Enoch, the seventh from Adam, and it is about him, his visions, his forgotten words, and his buried prophecies that this video begins to reveal what many have tried to erase. Enoch first appears in the book of Genesis, but his mention is brief, almost enigmatic. The text says, "And Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him." A short verse, but one that breaks all natural logic. Amid a genealogy where each character lives, begets children, and dies, Enoch is the exception. He does not die. He disappears. And this is not a narrative detail. It is a spiritual key. The first man to be taken from the earth without experiencing death was not a king, nor a priest, nor a lawgiver. He was a prophet, a unique messenger of celestial secrets. Enoch is the forerunner of the rapture, the living sign that there is a separated generation, a lineage invisible to the eyes of the world, but intimate with the secrets of heaven. He was taken because he pleased God. And those who please God so deeply are not left behind when heaven moves. The author of the letter to the Hebrews confirms this interpretation with spiritual precision. By faith, Enoch was taken up so that he should not see death, and he was not found because God had taken him. For before he was taken, he had this testimony that he pleased God. And here we are confronted with something greater, the rapture, this mysterious act in which a human being crosses dimensions without dying, is not a myth. It is a testimony, a seal, a celestial confirmation that there is a pattern of life that can literally break the natural cycle of existence. But Enoch was not just a man who lived in purity. He saw, he heard, he prophesied. In the New Testament, the book of Jude, just before Revelation, declares something that changes everything. It is written there, "And of these also Enoch, the seventh from Adam, prophesied, saying, Behold, the Lord has come with thousands of his saints to execute judgment against all." This is the oldest recorded prophecy about the Lord's coming in glory. Before Isaiah spoke of the suffering servant, before Jeremiah wept for Jerusalem, before even Moses lifted his eyes to Sinai, Enoch was already prophesying about the end times, about judgment, about eternal justice, about a God who does not sleep, who watches, and who will come to restore all things. This means Enoch was not just a righteous man taken from the earth. He was the first to announce the second coming, the first to see the glorified Messiah, the first to understand that the world is heading toward a spiritual climax, a cosmic conclusion. But where are Enoch's words? Why don't we read his prophecies in our Bibles? Why was the book that bears his name rejected, hidden, and labeled as apocryphal? even though it was preserved for millennia by Eastern Christian communities and directly quoted by New Testament authors? The answer is as uncomfortable as it is revealing. The content of Enoch is dangerous. His words not only expose the backstage of God's judgment, but also reveal the spiritual workings of the universe, the fall of angels, the origin of giants, the corruption of humanity before the flood, and the celestial structure that governs all things. It is a book that disturbs, that denounces, that lays bare the conflict between light and darkness with a clarity that few religious traditions are willing to face. And that is why the Book of Enoch was silenced. Not for lack of relevance, but for an excess of it. Its accounts speak of dimensional portals, 7 overlapping heavens, thrones of glory, angels imprisoned beneath mountains, giants who walked among men, and spiritual wars that took place before the foundation of the world. It is not a symbolic book. It is a prophetic account, transcending time and reaching our present with renewed strength. Enoch wrote not only for his generation, but for the elect of the last days. This is stated at the beginning of the book itself. The words of blessing of Enoch, with which he blessed the elect and righteous who would be alive in the day of tribulation, when all the wicked and godless are to be removed from the earth. These words are not just prophetic, they are timeless. They are addressed to you who are now hearing this message. Because if you are alive in a time when the structures of the world are shaking, if you sense that something greater is coming, that there is an invisible movement, then perhaps you are one of these elect, one of those whom Enoch saw in vision, thousands of years before you were born. He wrote to awaken this generation, the generation that would live through the final echoes of a conflict that began even before Adam was formed from the dust. And that is why we need to rediscover Enoch, not as an academic curiosity, but as a spiritual beacon. The man who walked with God and did not see death was not taken by chance. He was a sign, a prototype, a forerunner of what God will still do with many. And his writings, his words, his visions were not lost. They were preserved for this time, for now, for this moment when the earth groans, the heavens close, and the spirit cries out for repentance. Enoch was not just a mysterious figure in biblical genealogy. He was the bearer of celestial revelations that would span centuries. But the visions he received did not disappear with him. They were written, preserved, and later silenced by human hands. Now it is time to understand why these words were hidden and what lies behind the book the world tried to forget. Chapter 2. The origin of the Book of Enoch, mystery and exclusion. Some books are born to teach, others to comfort, but a few rare ones are written to awaken. The Book of Enoch belongs to this last category. Its words were not made to adorn ceremonies, but to cut through the veil of illusion. It does not soothe, it awakens. And that is precisely why it was silenced. Because where many expected doctrine, Enoch offered revelation. Where control was sought, he presented freedom. And where structure was desired, he pointed to the invisible. Understanding the origin of this book is understanding why it needed to be hidden. The so-called First Enoch is a collection of visions written between 300 years before Christ and the 1st century after the Messiah's birth. It was not written all at once. It was revealed gradually, like waves coming from heaven with messages the earth was not ready to hear. Its composition is divided into 5 main parts: the Book of the Watchers, the Book of Parables, the Astronomical Book, the Book of Dreams, and the Epistle of Enoch. Each of these sections reveals a layer of the spiritual world, like windows open to the heavens. And behind each of these windows, there is something that disturbs human systems. For centuries, this book was known, read, respected. It was quoted by ancient rabbis. It inspired mystics. It circulated among early Christians as a trusted source. And by the end of the 1st century, it was directly mentioned in the Epistle of Jude, when the author cites Enoch's prophecy, saying, "Behold, "The Lord has come with thousands of his saints." This citation is not symbolic. It is literal, words taken directly from the book of Enoch. The New Testament therefore recognizes that Enoch was a prophet, that he saw the end, and that he spoke of it before anyone else. But time passed. Christianity, once persecuted, became the official religion. And with power came disputes, selections, councils. It was necessary to define what was inspired and what was heresy. And in this filtering process, the Book of Enoch was pushed out, not because it was discredited, but because it was dangerous. Its pages spoke of angels who descended to earth, of giants who devoured men, of celestial calendars, of thrones of fire, of hidden dimensions, of portals, and of a judgment so precise, so unrelenting, that it shook any religious structure. It was too mystical for theologians, too sacred for empires. By the 4th century AD, with the consolidation of the biblical canon in the West, the Book of Enoch disappeared from official lists. Its use was discouraged, and gradually it was forgotten. Or rather, they tried to forget it. Because while this was happening in Rome, in Christian Ethiopia, the book was preserved, copied by hand, and treated as part of the Holy Scriptures. For over 1600 years, it was read in Ethiopian churches. There, the name of Enoch never stopped echoing. There, his voice was never silenced. In the 18th century, a Scottish explorer named James Bruce went to Ethiopia and returned to Europe with 3 complete copies of the Book of Enoch in Ge'ez, the liturgical language of that people. He didn't just bring back manuscripts, he brought back a buried cry, a revelation the West had preferred not to hear. And in the 20th century, the discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls in Qumran confirmed irrefutably that the Book of Enoch was ancient, legitimate, and used by Jewish communities long before Jesus was born. Fragments in Aramaic, the language of the Messiah, were found there. Writings that proved Enoch was more than tradition. He was living history. These discoveries were not just academic, they were spiritual, because they showed that the book many called apocryphal had in fact been preserved by God, that its words were not lost, they were guarded, like seeds buried, waiting for the right season to sprout. And perhaps that season is now, because never has the world so resembled the days Enoch described, days of spiritual mixture, of accelerated corruption, of soulless science, of power without compassion, days when fallen angels seem to have left descendants, days when men play at being gods, unaware that judgment is at the door. Reading the Book of Enoch carefully is like reading the spiritual script of what we are living through. It speaks of angels who broke divine laws and taught men forbidden sciences. It speaks of how the heavens were contaminated by rebellion. It speaks of how the righteous cried out for justice while the wicked grew in power. It speaks of visions of time shortening, of the moon and sun obeying celestial cycles that men forgot. It speaks of a Son of Man hidden in the heavens, awaiting the moment to judge kings, priests, tyrants, and multitudes. It speaks of everything the world tries to hide. And when you read these words, you can't help but feel that something is moving, that the same spirit that spoke to Enoch is still speaking, that the visions he had did not die with him, that his book has not returned now by chance. There is a weight in every sentence, as if they had been waiting for centuries to find eyes ready to read them. And perhaps, if you've come this far, it's because your eyes are among them. The silence around the Book of Enoch was not empty. It was strategic, because what it reveals cannot be used to manipulate. It does not serve religion as a product, it serves the truth. And the truth does not need temples to exist, it needs awakened hearts. That's why the book reappears now, not as a novelty, but as a reminder. A call back to the beginning, to the time when heaven still spoke to men, and to the men who still knew how to listen. Chapter 3. The arrival of the Watchers, the angels who broke the heavens. Not every rebellion begins on earth. Some have origins long before men existed, long before the clay breathed, long before time ran from Genesis to Revelation. The Book of Enoch takes us to a moment that precedes human chaos, a moment when the heavens were silent and order was perfect. But then something happened. A group of celestial beings called the Watchers broke the barrier that separated them from the world of men. They did not come with divine orders or on a holy mission. They came out of desire, a desire that changed the course of history and opened wounds that have never healed. According to the sacred text of Enoch, these angels were assigned to watch over the earth. There were 199 in all, led by a leader named Semjaza. His name carries the weight of an oath, for that is exactly what they did. They descended to Mount Hermon and sealed a pact among themselves, an irreversible covenant. They knew they were transgressing. They knew they were going against the will of the Most High. But still, they descended, because when they looked upon the daughters of men, they desired what was forbidden to them. This was not a simple fall. It was a collision between dimensions. The heavens bent, portals opened. What was spiritual became flesh. And from the union of these angels and human women, hybrid creatures were born, the Nephilim, giants in stature and in wickedness, beings who did not belong to the realm of men but now walked among them. Creatures who knew no limits, who devoured everything, who destroyed everything, men deformed inside and out, and the world, once balanced, began to break apart. The Nephilim were not just great in strength, they were great in perversion. With an insatiable thirst for blood, they corrupted not only the body, but also the soul of men. The civilizations of the time began to build around them, to worship them, to imitate them. And what was once light now became shadow. The very soil seemed contaminated, the earth wept, the heavens closed, the human heart was lost. And it was in this environment that Enoch lived. He saw it all happen, not with natural eyes, but with spiritual vision. He knew this invasion was not just physical, it was an evil plan to destroy creation from its roots. And the Watchers, these rebellious angels, did not limit themselves to producing monsters. They also taught men what they should not know. Azazel, one of the most influential among them, taught the secrets of weapons, war, seduction, and sorcery. Others taught astrology, enchantments, occult formulas, forbidden rituals. Everything that should have remained hidden in the celestial realm was now used by human hands. Knowledge was corrupted. Wisdom turned to poison. And humanity began to grow in power, but drifted further from God. The Book of Enoch describes this moment with details that startle. What should have been a heaven in harmony became a battlefield. The faithful angels, like Michael, Raphael, and Uriel, watched the earth deteriorate. The cries of men rose up, the innocent screamed, and even creation itself seemed to call for help. The mountains trembled, the waters churned, the animals strayed from their nature, because everything was being touched by something from another realm. God's original plan was being corrupted from within, and intervention was needed. It was then that Enoch was called, a man among many, a mortal, but with attentive ears and a clean heart. God took him and carried him in spirit. He crossed the veils. He ascended through celestial layers. He was led by angels to the throne of glory. There, not as a spectator, but as a witness, he heard the sentence that would be pronounced against the Watchers. He saw the books being opened. He listened to the eternal decrees, and he was chosen to be the intermediary between heaven and the fallen. Yes, Enoch the man was sent to deliver to the rebellious angels the news of their condemnation. Imagine the scene. A human being standing before angels who once shone like stars, now chained, awaiting judgment. Enoch, with divine authority, reads the sentence. There is no forgiveness. There is no return. Their offspring would be destroyed. They themselves would be cast into eternal abysses, their works would be erased, and the earth, which had almost been lost, would be restored. The impact of this is hard to measure, but Enoch did not waver. He fulfilled the mission. He wrote the words. He recorded everything, and he left us the account, so that we today would know that there are spiritual limits that cannot be crossed. The fall of the Watchers is not just an episode from the past. It is a portrait of a spiritual principle. Everything that rises against the divine order will be judged. It may take time, it may seem forgotten, but judgment comes, always. And this story shows us that there are consequences when spiritual beings interfere in the earthly realm outside of God's time and will. The Watchers wanted to mix the worlds, to create a new order, but God responded with justice. And that justice is still active. Many modern scholars have tried to turn this narrative into myth. They say the angels are symbols, the giants are metaphors. But Enoch's text is not poetic in that sense. It describes concrete events. It names names. It details locations. It distinguishes between types of angels, their roles, their punishments. There is an uncomfortable clarity in the text, and perhaps that is why it was rejected for so long. Because it reveals too much. Because it leaves no room for neutrality. Either you believe or you reject, but you cannot ignore. And when we look at the world today, with its accelerated technologies, its obsession with genetic manipulation, its culture of idolatry to the body and power, we begin to see that history may be repeating itself. The same influence that acted in Enoch's days may be trying to act again. The same spirit of transgression, the same desire to mix what is of heaven with what is of earth without permission. The Watchers fell, but their ideas persist. And that is why Enoch's message returns with such force. He did not write for his generation. He wrote for ours. He saw what is happening now. He left a warning. And that warning is not to frighten. It is to prepare, to remind us that there is a limit, that heaven still watches, that spiritual portals exist, that the giants may return, not in flesh but in systems, in ideas, in structures, and that the righteous need to be vigilant. With each new page of the Book of Enoch, we feel that we are not just reading. We are being read, examined, called. There is something in this text that pulls us in, as if a part of our consciousness recognizes that this is true, that this is returning, and if it is returning, it is because time is closing in. Perhaps it is time to take this seriously, to look at history with spiritual eyes, to understand that what happened before the flood was not just an anomaly, it was a warning. A portrait of what can happen again. And Enoch, the man who walked with God, was also the one who tried to tell us all this before it was too late. When the heavens were violated, the soil of the earth trembled, and from the choices of the fallen angels, a generation was born that should never have existed. They did not just walk among men, they dominated, corrupted, devoured, and now, we need to know the fruits of this transgression. The Nephilim. Chapter 4, the Nephilim, the forbidden children of heaven and earth. They should not have been born. They were not part of the original plan. They were the children of a forbidden union, the fruits of a celestial transgression. Hybrid creatures, born of human bodies and angelic essence. They were called the Nephilim, and their existence shook the heavens and contaminated the earth. When the Watchers descended and took human women, what arose from this mixture was not just strange, it was dangerous. Enoch describes them as giants, but also as beings who devoured everything they found. Not just out of hunger, but by nature. They did not merely exist, they consumed. They consumed men, animals, creation itself, and wherever they went, they left a trail of destruction. The word Nephilim appears briefly in the Bible in Genesis chapter 6. It says that at that time there were giants on the earth, and also afterward, when the sons of God went in to the daughters of men. It's a short sentence, but loaded with meaning. For centuries, Christian tradition avoided dealing with what this meant. Were these giants just metaphors, or were they truly physical beings who walked among men, dominating and corrupting everything around them? The Book of Enoch leaves no doubt. It confirms that these beings existed, that they were born from the mixing of angels and women, and that their presence was one of the reasons for the flood. The Nephilim are presented as spiritual aberrations, great in stature but also in arrogance, strong in body but empty of soul. They taught men to wage war, to dominate, to destroy. Their intelligence was used to manipulate, their strength to subdue. They positioned themselves as gods among mortals. They demanded worship, built monuments, performed bloody rituals. The earth was filled with blood, violence, fear. Enoch saw them, and not only saw, he understood what they represented. They were the breaking of order, the violation of the limit, the sign that something greater was out of control. But it wasn't just the giants who caused the corruption, it was what they unleashed. They became the center of a sick spiritual culture, a society that revolved around domination and excess. Humanity began to imitate them, to follow their customs, to desire their power. And so, wickedness spread like a disease passed from generation to generation. The flesh was corrupted, the spirit drifted away, and the heavens, which for a time remained silent, began to move. The faithful angels, Michael, Raphael, Uriel, watched the advance of this corruption. They saw that men were losing their essence, that the image of God in humans was being distorted. The cries of the innocent rose up. The earth groaned. The very elements of creation seemed to react. The waters rebelled, the forests died, the animals turned hostile. Everything was out of place, and it was at this moment that God declared, "My spirit will not strive with man forever." Time was running out. The measure of iniquity had reached its limit. The destruction of the Nephilim then became a spiritual necessity. They could not remain. They could not continue multiplying their influence. Their actions had broken the line between heaven and earth. Enoch records that the angels themselves asked for their children to be exterminated, as if they knew they had created something beyond control. And the divine response was clear. The Nephilim would be destroyed, and their parents, the Watchers, would be imprisoned until the final judgment. This was not just a punishment, it was a cleansing, a reset. The flood was not a random punishment. It was a direct response to the chaos caused by these creatures. And that is why, even though briefly mentioned in the biblical text, the Nephilim carry immense weight. They represent the breaking point, the red line that was crossed, the proof that evil can grow so much that it must be uprooted. The generation of Noah did not perish just because of human wickedness. It perished because the earth had been spiritually contaminated. The presence of the Nephilim made restoration impossible without judgment. But the most unsettling thing of all is that Enoch's text states that the spirits of the Nephilim did not disappear. When their bodies died, their spirits did not return to heaven, nor were they judged like ordinary humans. They became wandering entities. According to the Book of Enoch, the spirits of the Nephilim, after their destruction, became wandering entities known as demons in some traditions, unclean spirits, roaming the earth, seeking bodies, causing torments. And these spirits, according to the Enochian tradition, are the origins of what we call demons today. They were not created as such. They were born of transgression. They are the fruits of an error that crossed dimensions, and they continue to act. This changes a lot, because it shows that the spiritual battle we face today has ancient roots. That what we see in modern times, possessions, oppressions, spiritual confusions, are not just isolated phenomena. They are traces, signs that ancient errors still echo, and that the Nephilim, even without flesh, continue to influence. in ideas, in systems, in uncontrolled desires. They no longer rule as before, but they operate in the shadows. And their greatest power lies in being forgotten. That is why the book of Enoch is so necessary, because it reminds us. It makes us look back, not with nostalgia, but with discernment. It shows us that there are cycles, that evil reinvents itself, that the spirit of the Nephilim may be hidden in many forms, in the culture that values strength over compassion, in power without justice, in knowledge without reverence. They may no longer walk in flesh, but they walk among us in ideas. And that is why we need to recognize the signs. In speaking of the Nephilim, Enoch does not invite us to fear. He calls us to vigilance. He shows us that the spiritual world is not a metaphor, that there are boundaries that when violated bring real consequences, that sin is not just moral, it is structural, that some actions open doors that take centuries to close, and that the only true protection is to walk with God, as He Himself walked, as an example, as a testimony, as a warning. It is no coincidence that we are rediscovering all this now. Time is narrowing. What was before will be again. And the children of deception will manifest once more, not as visible giants, but as spiritual influences, increasingly subtle and powerful. History is repeating itself, and the book of Enoch was left precisely so that the chosen ones would recognize the signs. But the heavens were not silent. The Most High, in His glory, looked upon the contaminated creation and prepared the decree. Enoch, the one who walked with God, was called not only to see, but to announce judgment to the rebellious angels themselves. Their time was up, and now justice would begin. Chapter 5. The Judgment of the Angels. Heaven's justice against the rebels. The heavens can wait, but not forever. God's silence is never passivity. He observes, He weighs, He waits. But when the cup is full, judgment comes. Enoch was called to witness this moment, the day when the patience of the heavens ended. When the angels who had broken the divine order heard their eternal sentence, it was not an impulsive punishment. It was a just response, calculated, holy, because what they had done was not just disobedience, it was corruption on a spiritual scale. And the heavens needed to respond. These angels, known as the Watchers, had descended with twisted intent. They took women, produced monsters, taught arts that men should not know. They introduced dangerous spiritual practices and created a lineage that nearly destroyed humanity. But what they perhaps did not expect was that divine justice also had messengers, and one of them would be Enoch, a man, a mere mortal, chosen to deliver an eternal message to the fallen immortals. In the book of Enoch, this moment is described with an intensity that no other scripture reaches. God sends Enoch to these imprisoned angels to declare the decree: there will be no forgiveness. There will be no restoration. They violated creation, they broke the boundaries, and now they were condemned. Their petitions would be rejected, their pleas ignored. Those who once walked among the heavens would now be cast into the depths of the earth, chained beneath the mountains, awaiting the great day of final judgment. The impact of this scene is profound, because it shows that not everything in heaven is absolute, that even angels answer to a higher law. That rebellion is not tolerated just because it comes from above. God shows no partiality between men and angels when it comes to justice. And this also teaches us something fundamental. There is no impunity in eternity. There may be delay, there may be silence, but never forgetfulness. Enoch stands between the two worlds. He delivers the sentence, but he also hears the cries. The fallen angels weep, plead, beg for mercy. They ask Enoch to intercede for them. They ask that his words be carried to the throne, but the verdict had already been sealed. It was too late. Enoch's presence there was not a chance for repentance, but a reminder of the order that cannot be broken. He represents the human who remained steadfast while the celestials strayed. And this is symbolic because it shows that man, though frail, can be more aligned with the heart of God than those created to serve him in the heights. The watchers would be cast into deep abysses, dark, silent places where neither light nor sound nor memory would reach them. And there they would remain until the day of decision. Their children, the Nephilim, would be destroyed, and their spirits condemned to wander the earth as restless entities without peace. The line that had been crossed would be sealed again, but the consequences would still echo through the centuries. This part of the Book of Enoch is not just a story of condemnation. It is a portrait of God's character. He is patient, but also a judge. He is love, but also holy. He gives time, but also ends cycles. And this invites us to reflect on the time we live in. Because if judgment fell on the angels, why would it be delayed for men? If the heavens did not tolerate the rebellion of glorified beings, why would they endure the growing iniquity of humanity? Today, many try to shape the idea of God to their own convenience. They prefer to think of a creator who always forgives, always waits, always accepts. But Enoch reminds us of a forgotten truth. The same God who saves also judges. The same God who lifts up also brings down. And his time is not like ours. He sees beyond, he weighs intentions, and when he decides to act, nothing can stop his hand. The fallen angels are a testimony to this. They were powerful, glorious, immortal. But even that did not spare them from the sentence. They trusted in their position, but forgot the greater authority. And by breaking the covenant with heaven, they lost everything. Beauty, mission, access, eternity, everything. And they were cast out as an example, so that all men or celestial beings would remember that God's order is unbreakable. Enoch witnesses all this with sobriety. He does not rejoice, he does not accuse, he simply records, because his mission is to be a bridge between the high and the low. He walks between the throne and the abyss, between glory and the fall, and that is why his book holds such power. Because it does not just speak of visions, it speaks of eternal decisions, of sentences that are still in effect, of doors that have closed and others that are still open. Perhaps this is one of the strongest messages of this chapter. There are still open doors. There is still time. The judgment of the angels serves as a warning, a clear alert that not everything is eternal, that there are deadlines, limits, moments that do not return, and that when heaven decides to act, no one can stop it. Enoch's generation saw the angels fall, the giants die, the heavens manifest in fire and justice. Enoch wrote it all down so that we, living centuries later, would not be caught by surprise. He saw the end before the end, and what he wrote now returns with force, because the stage is being set again. Corruption spreads, truth is ignored. The earth becomes like those days, and justice once again draws near. Perhaps you feel it, a discomfort, a sense of urgency you can't explain, as if something is changing, as if time is narrowing. Do not ignore this feeling, because perhaps it is the same call that moved Enoch to walk with God while everyone else surrendered to chaos. Perhaps it is time to adjust the path, to align the soul, to prepare the spirit, because if judgment came upon the angels, it will also come upon men. The sentence was pronounced, and those who once shone in the heavens were cast into darkness, but the earth still needed to be cleansed. The echoes of corruption lingered, and men no longer distinguished good from evil. It was then that God decided to purify everything, and judgment came as water. Chapter 6. The Flood. The earth purified by judgment. The flood was not just rain. It was the heavens crying out. The earth was sick, corrupted by the Nephilim and human wickedness. God saw everything, the blood of the innocent, the violence, the idolatry, and he acted. The waters came, not to punish, but to purify. Enoch prophesied this even before Noah built the ark, He saw that the world would be washed, reset. Noah, a righteous man, was chosen to preserve life. His ark was not just a boat, it was God's hope for humanity. As the waters rose, the Nephilim fell, but their spirits survived, wandering as shadows. Enoch knew the flood was just the beginning of a spiritual battle that continues to this day. Are we still facing these shadows? Subscribe to the channel to understand what the flood really meant. Comment, do you think another judgment is coming? The judgment did not come suddenly. It was announced in silence, carried across centuries. It formed gradually, like heavy clouds in the sky waiting for the order to pour out justice. The flood, often remembered as a natural tragedy, was not just heavy rain. It was a response from heaven, a planned reset, a total purification of the earth. And the book of Enoch shows us that behind the water was a voice, the voice of a God who does not ignore corruption, who sees everything, and who, when necessary, cleanses everything. The days leading up to the flood were marked by chaos, perversion, and spiritual contamination. The earth was no longer the same. The mixing of rebellious angels and human women had produced a deformed generation, the Nephilim, and human culture had completely surrendered to this influence. There was no purity, no respect, no reverence left. Cities grew without justice, words no longer held truth, and even the thoughts of the human heart leaned continually toward evil. There was no balance, no limit, no repentance. The earth was filled with violence, and creation groaned. God did not act out of anger, he acted out of justice, because holiness cannot coexist with corruption. The judgment was the response to the cry of the earth, to the suffering of the innocent, to the distortions that had spread everywhere. In the book of Enoch, this judgment is announced in advance, and it is Enoch who first declares that the days of men would be shortened. He sees that time is running out, that heaven is preparing something that will change everything, that divine patience is reaching its end, and in this context, Noah emerges. A man who, according to the text, was righteous in his generations, someone who did not become contaminated by the influence of the fallen angels, someone who kept his lineage pure, both physically and spiritually. He was chosen to survive, not just because he was good, but because there was still in him a connection to God's original purpose. The ark he built was more than a boat. It was a symbol of separation, a barrier between what would be saved and what would be swept away by the waters. It represented judgment, but also hope. Enoch himself prophesied about Noah. He saw in a vision that a man would come, and that this man would be different, that his life would mark a new era, that through him the earth would have a second chance. And this shows that the flood was not just an end, it was a restart, a new beginning, a time to cleanse the earth of everything that had been perverted, and to restore the spiritual order that had been broken by the watchers. The waters came, not as ordinary rain, but as judgment poured out. The heavens opened, and the fountains of the deep were broken up. The earth was covered, and everything that breathed outside the ark perished. The flood surged, a relentless force, cleansing the land of corruption and resetting creation for a new beginning. System perished. There is no way to soften this event. It was drastic, but it was also just, because the level of spiritual corruption had surpassed all limits. The blood of the innocent cried out, and justice responded. The waters did not just kill, they washed. They did not just destroy, they purified. The book of Enoch describes in detail the destruction of the Nephilim in this process. Their works were erased, their bodies were overcome, their names forgotten. What remained was the bare, wet, silent earth, a reset world, and a small group of survivors with a mission to repopulate the earth without repeating the mistakes of the past. Noah, his sons, and their wives carried in their hands not only the continuation of the human race, but the responsibility to restore the covenant with the Creator. But even after the judgment, the text of Enoch reminds us that the spirits of the dead giants, the Nephilim, continued to wander the earth. They became the unclean spirits that would seek to corrupt future generations. This shows that although the judgment was physical, the problem was also spiritual. And this type of influence could only be fought with obedience, vigilance, and fear of God. The invisible war would continue even after the end of the flood. The post-flood world was a new world, but still vulnerable. The earth was clean, but the human heart still carried remnants of the old world. And that is why, even after so much suffering, sin would spread again. The lesson was given, but not everyone would learn it. What the flood shows clearly is that God's holiness does not adapt to sin. It confronts it, it resists it, and if necessary, it removes it. Enoch saw all this before it happened. He was the first to announce that the world would be judged, that creation would be restored, that the covenant would need to be renewed. His voice crossed time, and his book was preserved to remind us that God's standards have not changed, that he still observes, that he still weighs, that he still separates the righteous from the unrighteous. Today, when we look around, we see that the earth is once again full of violence, confusion, and a reversal of values. And the same feeling that preceded the flood begins to spread again. Something is wrong, something is out of place. There is tension in the air, and many feel, even without being able to explain, that something big is about to happen. Perhaps, like in the days of Enoch and Noah, we are once again facing the end of a cycle. And that is why the book of Enoch returns with such force in this time, because it speaks to us, because it gives us understanding, because it prepares us. The flood was a milestone, a line drawn by the hand of God, a reminder that he does not ignore wickedness, that he hears the cries, that he acts at the right time, and that judgment is only the beginning of restoration. After the water, silence. A remade world, but still vulnerable. And in the midst of it, a man who saw it all before it happened, because before the judgment, Enoch had already crossed the heavens, and what he saw up there reveals that nothing in this world is beyond the control of the Most High. Now it is time to ascend with Enoch and see with him what the eyes of the earth cannot see. Chapter 7. The Celestial Visions, what Enoch saw when he was taken. When God called Enoch to himself, it was not just to spare him from the judgment that would come upon the earth. It was in order to show him, and through him, us, what human eyes had never beheld. Enoch did not simply disappear. He crossed the veils of the visible world and was taken to the heart of the invisible. There, where the laws of matter do not apply, where time does not flow like ours, where everything is revelation, presence, and glory. He saw what many would long to see, and what he witnessed was so grand, so powerful, that words can hardly describe it. Enoch was led by faithful angels through elevated pathways. The text speaks of heavens upon heavens, as if there were layers of the spiritual, levels that can only be accessed by those who are called. On his journey, he passed through portals of light, crossed celestial domains, and arrived at places where even the angels cover themselves before the majesty of the Most High. He saw the thrones, he saw the books, he saw the faces of those who stood before God in complete reverence, and he saw the saints who awaited with expectation the consummation of all things. One of the most striking points of the book of Enoch is its description of the heavens. He speaks of ordered structures like cosmic gears. Everything in the heights follows an exact order. The stars, the moons, the winds, the luminaries, everything fulfills its function, obeying the eternal purpose of God. There is no chance in heaven. Nothing moves without permission. Enoch saw that the entire universe is alive, conscious, operating under the authority of a king who governs everything with justice and holiness. Each star is like a spark of obedience. Each celestial movement is like a wordless psalm. He also saw the places of the righteous, environments full of light where spirits wait in peace for the fulfillment of the divine promise. There is no pain, no anxiety, no hurry there, only the certainty that everything will be restored. But he also saw the opposite, the dark, cold places where the wicked await judgment, places of shadow, where the soul feels the weight of its choices. The contrast between the two worlds was absolute. And Enoch understood that heaven knows every choice, every step, every intention, and that no one remains hidden before God. One of the most powerful visions Enoch received was of the throne of the Most High. He describes this throne as a mountain of fire, a light that cannot be looked at directly, and a voice that shakes even the foundations of the universe. Before this throne, the angels bow. Time bends. The books are opened. Words are recorded. Everything is observed. Everything is written. Enoch saw that nothing escapes God's gaze, that everything done, thought, or felt is taken into account, and that the judgment will not only be on visible actions, but also on the secrets of the heart. It was in this environment of glory that Enoch received revelations about the future. He saw the kingdoms of the earth being shaken. He saw the rise of rulers who would stand against God. He saw wars, confusion, deception, and he also saw restoration. He saw the arrival of a being called the Son of Man, someone with a human appearance but with celestial authority. This Son of Man would be exalted. He would sit at the right hand of God. He would be the judge of the nations, and he would bring back the lost justice. Centuries later, Jesus would use this same title to refer to himself, a direct connection to Enoch's visions. This shows that Enoch saw not only the heavens, he saw the complete plan. He saw the beginning and the end. He saw judgment, but he also saw victory. And this teaches us that the apocalypse is not just destruction, it is also restoration. It is not just the end of the world, it is the beginning of the kingdom. Enoch saw what few can understand, that everything being shaken today was already written, already revealed, already foreseen in the celestial chambers. He also had access to mysteries about time. He saw cycles, spiritual seasons, prophetic gears. He saw that time is not just a straight line, but a series of layers, repetitions, warnings. Everything has a time. Everything has a purpose. And when that time is fulfilled, heaven moves, the signs appear, and those who are attentive can perceive them. Enoch wrote for these, for those who feel, for those who see beyond the news, beyond the chaos, beyond human explanations. He wrote for the awakened. And in all this, what is most striking is that Enoch remained humble. He did not exalt himself. He did not use what he saw to elevate himself. He recorded everything with reverence. He knew it was not about him. It was about what God wanted to say to humanity. It was about divine faithfulness, about the justice that would come, and about the call that would echo through generations. When taken to the heavens, Enoch did not just see. He heard, he felt, he was transformed. The text does not say if Enoch returned to earth in a physical sense, but it makes clear that he was commanded to write, to record all the visions, and these records would be kept for the right time. They would not be understood by everyone, nor read by everyone. But when the moment came, they would be revealed, and they would be like lamps lit in the midst of darkness. Perhaps that time is now. Perhaps Enoch's visions are being fulfilled before our eyes. And if that is true, we need to learn from him, from his life, from his silence, from his obedience. He did not need titles, nor applause. He simply walked with God, and he was taken, not because he sought to escape the world, but because he no longer belonged to it. His heart was in the heights. His mind was on eternal things, and perhaps that is the secret. Perhaps in a world as confused as ours, the greatest sign of wisdom is this: to keep your eyes on heaven and your feet firmly on the truth. Before the throne, Enoch saw that time was not random. Everything followed cycles, orders, judgments, promises. And he understood the end was revealed from the beginning. Now it is time to learn what he wrote about the end of all things, and about the final judgment that would separate the righteous from the wicked. Chapter 8. The prophecies of the end, the final judgment, and the victory of the righteous. The visions Enoch received were not limited to his time. They transcended generations, broke through the cycles of history, and pointed to a future that is still approaching. A future in which the heavens will open again, in which time will reach its limit, and in which all creation will be judged. The Book of Enoch is, at the same time, a warning and a promise. It reveals that the end will not just be a collapse of systems or a global crisis. It will be a determined day, an exact moment when the righteous will be exalted and the wicked finally judged. The most powerful prophecy of Enoch is tied to the coming of the Son of Man, a glorious figure rising as a judge before all humanity. Enoch saw him in splendor, surrounded by angels, seated on a throne of glory. He would be exalted among the chosen, receive power and authority, and open the books, the celestial records of every soul's deeds. Nothing would be hidden, nothing would be ignored. And before this throne, the kings of the earth, the mighty, the corrupt, and the rebellious would be silent. No justification, no defense, only the weight of the truth. This judgment would not be driven by anger, but by justice, a perfect justice without flaws, without bias. Enoch describes the faces of the wicked being erased from eternal memory. Their works, their secret alliances, their perverse words. Everything would fall to the ground. They had mocked the truth, persecuted the righteous, rejected repentance, and now the sentence was sealed. They would be removed from the earth. Their memory would be erased. The heavens would no longer recall their names. A silence would fall upon them, and then they would be delivered to the darkness. But while judgment descended on the unjust, the opposite happened to the righteous. They were exalted, recognized. Light enveloped them. They received garments of glory, crowns of honor, and a place before the throne. These did not stand out in the world. They did not seek fame. Many were forgotten, persecuted, silenced. But their names were written in the books of heaven. They kept the faith, they walked in truth, they loved justice, and now they received the kingdom that had been promised to them. Enoch saw this scene. He saw the righteous shining like stars, and his vision was clear. The end is not ruin, the end is separation. This separation between the righteous and the wicked is the heart of the prophecy. It will not be based on religion or appearance. It will be based on faithfulness, on choice, on obedience. Enoch shows us that God knows the innermost being, that he weighs the spirit, that he observes even what the world does not see, and that, in the end, every soul will reap exactly what it sowed. There will be no deception. There will be no injustice. The judgment will be complete. He also saw that time itself would be judged, that prophetic cycles would come to an end, that human calendars would fall before the eternal plan. The structures of the world would collapse. Heaven and earth would pass away, but the words of the Most High would remain, and in that final moment, the kingdom of God would be established, not as a theory, but as reality, not as a distant promise, but as a present government. Creation, which has grown since ancient days, would finally be freed, and in this new time, there would be no more death, no pain, no darkness. Evil would be uprooted. The fallen angels would be cast into the lake of fire. The demons would lose their dominion. The empires of darkness would be destroyed, and the earth would be restored, renewed, transformed into a dwelling place for the righteous. Enoch saw all this. He saw a new earth, a place where the presence of God would be constant, where there would be no need for the sun, because God himself would be the light, a place of perfect communion, immense joy, and indescribable peace. These visions, far from causing fear, produce hope. They show that the end of injustice is the beginning of justice, that the end of sin is the beginning of holiness, and that all the suffering, all the tears, all the struggles lived here are not in vain. The righteous do not fight for nothing. They await something real, and that something is already on the way. The signs are everywhere. The world trembles, the nations are in turmoil, men lose their way. Enoch had already seen this, and he wrote so that when the time came, the awakened would understand what was happening. Today, when reading these prophecies, we cannot remain neutral. Time is no longer the same. History is accelerating, and the choice is before each one of us. There is no escaping judgment, but there is a way to prepare for it. Enoch not only announced the end, he showed the way to be on the right side when the end comes, and that way has always been the same: to walk with God, to seek the truth, to reject corruption, to love justice, to remain steadfast even when everyone around you gives in. Divine justice never fails, and judgment is certain. And this is the great hope that runs through the entire book of Enoch. God does not just see wickedness. He honors faithfulness. He does not just judge, he rewards. And when the Son of Man sits on the throne, with the angels around, with the books opened, and the worlds in silence, it will be the end of one era and the beginning of another. The sentence was read, the unjust were removed, and the faithful exalted. But God's plan does not end there, because after the judgment comes the glory. And Enoch saw with his own eyes the kingdom of the righteous being established on a new earth. Chapter 9, the kingdom of the righteous, the new earth and eternal glory. Not all stories end in tragedy, and the end that Enoch saw was not just destruction and judgment, it was also redemption, restoration, a new beginning. The final act of Enoch's vision is the most beautiful of all. He saw justice triumph. He saw evil uprooted. He saw the faithful take possession of an inheritance prepared since the beginning of time. And he saw God no longer distant, but among men, present, near, real. The kingdom of the righteous was not just a promise, it was the fulfillment of everything heaven had prepared since before the foundation of the world. Enoch describes this kingdom as a place where the elect will dwell forever, an environment of light, peace, and joy. There will be no more division between heaven and earth. The glory of God will fill everything. The saints will be clothed in purity. Their tears will be wiped away, their wounds healed, their struggles rewarded. They will not be remembered by men, but they will be remembered by God. Their names will be written in the book of life. They will walk with the Creator as Enoch walked, and they will finally be home. This kingdom will not be conquered by force or merit. It will be a gift, a grace. The reward of those who remained faithful, who resisted deception, who preferred the truth even when it seemed lonely, who kept their hearts pure even in the midst of the world's mire. They will inherit a new, restored earth, without injustice, without fear, without darkness. Creation, freed from the dominion of corruption, will flourish again. The rivers will be pure. The soil will be fertile. The sky will be clear. Everything will be as it was in the beginning, but even better. Enoch saw thrones prepared for the righteous. They will not just be inhabitants of the kingdom. They will be kings and priests. They will have authority. They will participate in the government of the Messiah. They will share in the glory he received. There will be no envy, no division. Each one will have their role, and everything will be complete. Unity will be perfect. Worship will be constant, not out of obligation, but out of joy. Because finally, the human heart will be at peace. That restlessness that always accompanies us, the desire for something greater, for a place where everything makes sense, will find its answer. The most impressive thing is that Enoch saw God himself descending and dwelling with men. He did not speak only of angels or distant visions. He saw the presence. He saw the Most High walking among the righteous, speaking with them, comforting, celebrating. This shows us that God's plan was never just to judge or correct. It was always to be together, to restore communion, to gather the children home, and to make all things new. The kingdom of the righteous is the materialization of divine love in its purest form. In this new time, there will be no more death. The cycles will end. Eternity will be reality. Time will no longer have weight. There will be no more deadlines, no more losses, no more goodbyes. There will only be life, abundant life, full life. And everything that seemed distant or impossible will be revealed with clarity. The righteous will understand the mysteries that once seemed hidden. Their questions will have answers. Their whys will have meaning, because in the presence of glory, everything will be understood. The book of Enoch ends with this vision, not to entertain, but to encourage, to show that it is worth remaining steadfast, that it is worth choosing the narrow path, that it is worth keeping the faith, because there is an end prepared for evil, but there is an eternity reserved for the faithful. This promise was not made by men, nor does it depend on systems. It was written in the heavens, recorded in the eternal books. Enoch saw it, and that is why he wrote. Today, this vision returns to us as a reminder, a call. The world is in darkness. Systems are failing. Empires are falling, but the kingdom of the righteous will not be shaken. It does not depend on the economy, nor on politics, nor on religion. It already exists, and it is drawing near. With every step of history, every sign, every crisis, it becomes more visible, closer, and those with spiritual eyes can already perceive it. And this perception invites us to a decision. Where are we headed? What are we building? What are we waiting for? Enoch saw the end, and he saw the new beginning. And now, we are the ones living in the bridge between the two times. We have in our hands the opportunity to align our hearts with what is eternal, to leave behind what is temporary, and to walk with steadfastness toward what will never end. The kingdom of the righteous is real. It was revealed. It is written. It is sealed. And it is on the way. Those who persevere will see it with their own eyes. Those who believe in it will receive their inheritance. Those who truly desire it will have their place reserved, because the God who showed all this to Enoch has not changed. He still speaks, he still calls, he still prepares. And his promise remains: the righteous will shine like the sun in the kingdom of their Father. The kingdom of the righteous is real, and it is already on the way. But until it fully manifests, there is a decision that needs to be made, because time is narrowing. And Enoch's final warning was left as a cry for this generation. And that cry echoes now in the final chapter of this video. Chapter 10, the final warning, Enoch and the call for today. Enoch's words were not buried in the past. They were preserved, hidden for a time, but never forgotten by the heavens, because what he wrote was not just for his generation, it was for ours, a generation that, like the one before the flood, lives amidst confusion, a reversal of values, a directionless rush, and pride disguised as progress. And it is in this scenario that Enoch's voice echoes again, not as a historical curiosity, but as an urgent warning. A sign that time is running out once more. The book of Enoch was written for the righteous of the last days. He declared this in the very first lines. He knew his visions would not be fully understood in his time. He knew that many things he saw were about a future time, a time when the earth would be contaminated again, when men would be too busy to listen. But he also knew there would be a few who were awake. People who would hear, who would recognize the signs, and who would turn to God before the door closed again. This is the power of Enoch's final warning. He does not just recount what he saw, He calls, he shakes, he insists, he leaves no room for indifference, because he saw what happens when man ignores the spiritual. He saw the watchers fall. He saw the giants dominate. He saw the earth sink into corruption. He saw judgment come like an irresistible wave, but he also saw restoration, the victory of the faithful, the new creation. And so his message is not just of judgment, it is of opportunity, of choice. Today, more than ever, this call resounds. We live in accelerated times. Science advances, but the human soul empties. Information multiplies, but discernment disappears. Voices multiply, but the truth hides. The world seems to be heading toward a collapse, not just economic or social, but spiritual. And it is in this void that Enoch's warning makes sense, because it points to the root of the problem. The turning away from God, the rejection of holiness, the exchange of eternity for fleeting pleasures. Enoch did not write for the religious, he wrote for the sensitive, for those who can still feel the weight of spiritual things, for those who, even surrounded by chaos, keep the flame of faith alive, for those who do not want to be swept away by the current. His warning is simple but profound. Walk with God as he walked. Do not be distracted. Do not sell out. Do not lose yourself. There is a judgment forming. Decisions are being made. And there is an invisible line being drawn between those who resist and those who surrender to the system. The most interesting thing is that Enoch does not argue. He reports. He saw. He heard. He witnessed what many only imagine. He entered heaven. He crossed dimensions, he spoke with angels, he wrote what he was commanded, and he was taken. God took him, not to be forgotten, but to become a sign that it is possible to live in this world without belonging to it, a sign that it is possible to please God even when everyone else ignores him, a sign that it is possible to be taken out of the midst of destruction if the heart is where it should be. Enoch's warning also reveals a spiritual pattern. Every time wickedness multiplies, heaven begins to act, first in silence, then with signs, then with judgment. But before all that, he sends a voice, a word, a warning. Enoch was that voice in the past. Today, his words are echoed by others, not with the same revelation, but with the same spirit, a spirit of urgency, of compassion, because time does not wait, and every minute without a response is a step closer to the closing of the door. But not everything is a warning. There is hope, much hope, because Enoch also saw the future shining. He saw the kingdom of the righteous. He saw the elect being restored. He saw God dwelling with men. And this vision must be our anchor. We are not just fleeing judgment. We are walking toward glory. We are not just saying no to the system of this world. We are saying yes to the eternal government of the Messiah. It is not a flight, it is a direction, and this direction needs to be chosen every day, not with words, but with actions, with renunciation, with focus. Enoch was not part of the crowds. He did not build temples. He did not start movements. He simply walked with God, day after day, step by step, and that was enough to be taken, to be separated, to be remembered. What heaven seeks today is not spectacle, it is faithfulness, simple, silent but constant, and perhaps that is what this generation most needs to hear, that it is still possible to be faithful, that it is still possible to say no to the world and yes to heaven, that there is still time, but not much, that the signs are already everywhere, that the prophecies are being fulfilled before our eyes, and that the book of Enoch did not resurface by chance. It returned because its time has come, because it speaks of now, because it was written for you. And we come to the end of this journey through the forgotten pages of the book of Enoch. I hope each revelation has ignited a new spark of curiosity in you and strengthened your faith even more. If any of these prophecies resonated in your heart, write in the comments which one impacted you the most. Your opinion is essential for the Biblical Prophet family to grow more and more. If this video added something new to your spiritual journey, leave in the comments which insight touched your heart the most and why. Share this content with those who wish to unravel ancient mysteries, and together, may we illuminate the path to the truth revealed in the scriptures. Don't forget to leave your like to support the Biblical Prophet channel and subscribe now, activating the bell to receive our next revelations firsthand. And now, open your heart. In a moment, 2 videos will appear on the screen, designed to deepen your biblical understanding. Choose the one that inspires you the most. Click and continue steadfast in your journey of faith and knowledge. Until the next insight. Amen.